The Vortak fleet cut through the silent void, sleek warships descending toward the blue and green world below. Earth, as the humans had called it, was supposed to be an easy conquest. The reports from their long-range probes had shown no advanced spacefaring technology, no planetary defenses capable of resisting their might. It should have been a clean invasion. Instead, the planet was silent. Commander Zelvar stood at the viewport of the command ship Vorax Wrath, his slit-pupiled eyes narrowing at the abandoned cities stretching across the landscape. There was no sign of resistance. No military. No life. "This is not right," said First Strategist Corvel, stepping beside him. The female Vortak's bioarmor pulsed with iridescent light, her neural interface feeding her direct scans of the surface. "The planet's power grids have failed. There are fires, collapsed structures, but no enemy forces." Zelvar's mandibles clicked together in frustration. Conquering a lifeless world was not glory, it was pointless. "Deploy scout drones," he ordered. "And send a reconnaissance unit to the surface." Minutes later, sleek drones zipped across the planet's surface, scanning the ruined cities. What they reported back made no sense. Human corpses littered the streets, some rotting, others fresh. Yet no weapons fire was detected. No trace of orbital bombardment. It was as if the entire population had simply died. Aboard one of the landing craft, a Vortak recon team touched down in the center of a ruined metropolis. The city's name had once been New York, but now it was a graveyard. Captain Raunek led his warriors through the empty streets, their energy weapons humming softly. Still no signs of resistance, Raunek reported. Moving deeper into. The transmission cut to static. Zelvar's eyes widened. What happened? Corvel furiously tapped into the neural link. Interference. I'm attempting to re-establish. A new transmission flickered through. But it was not Raunek. It was screaming. Horrific, guttural sounds filled the command deck. There was the crack of plasma fire, followed by gurgling, choking cries. Then silence. The Vortak command stared at each other. Then, a single visual feed came back online. Zelvar stepped forward, watching as the helmet cam of a fallen warrior flickered to life. The image was shaky, but it showed what had attacked them. Humans. Or what had once been human. Pale, rotting flesh. Vacant, milky eyes. Jaws distended, blood dripping from their cracked lips. They swarmed over the fallen Vortak, tearing into him with unnatural strength. His plasma rifle fired once, twice, then fell silent. A figure in the background twitched unnaturally, rising from the ground. It was one of Raunek's soldiers, one who had just been killed. But now, his head jerked toward the camera. His mouth opened in a horrible, inhuman shriek. Zelvar's hearts pounded. This world is not lifeless, Corvel whispered. It is cursed. The transmission ended. The command deck was silent. Then, suddenly, the ship's proximity alarms blared. Movement. Hundreds, no, thousands, of life signs were closing in on their landing sites. The dead were coming. And the Vortak had no idea how to stop them. The control room aboard Vorax Wrath was in chaos. Vortak officers shouted over one another, their neural interfaces flashing with incoming distress signals from their ground teams. The dead world they had expected had turned into something far worse, an active nightmare. Commander Zelvar clenched his mandibles as he watched the live feed from the surface. His warriors were being overrun. These creatures, once human, did not move like a mindless horde. They attacked with an unnatural hunger, shrugging off injuries that would have felled any organic being. A sudden alert flashed across his display. Alert, unknown pathogen detected. Zelvar's slit-pupiled eyes narrowed. What pathogen? Corvel, his first strategist, worked furiously at the controls, attempting to decrypt the data pouring in from their bioscanners. It's not like any virus we've encountered. The infected, she hesitated, mandibles twitching. They are reanimating, Commander. Even our own troops. Zelvar's breath caught. He turned back to the monitor, his gaze locking onto the body of a fallen Vorthack soldier. The warrior had died moments ago, his exoskeletal armor torn open, his bioluminescent blood pooling on the cracked pavement. Then, in a sickening spasm, the corpse twitched. His limbs jerked unnaturally. The warrior's glowing eyes, once vibrant with intelligence, flickered and turned cloudy. Then, with an inhuman snarl, the fallen Vorthack rose to his feet. It was no longer a soldier. It was something else. A thing without a soul. Before the other warriors could react, the reanimated soldier lunged at his former comrades. His movements were erratic but impossibly strong. The energy blade of one Vorthack slashed across his torso, but he barely flinched. Another warrior fired a plasma bolt, the shot tearing into his side, but it did nothing to stop his relentless attack. The infected Vorthack tackled one of his brethren to the ground and tore into his throat with jagged teeth. The ground team's comms erupted in panic. They're turning. Even our own. Static. Zelvar slammed a clawed fist onto the console. Pull the remaining ground forces out now. Get them back on the ships before this spreads further. Corvel hesitated. Commander, it may already be too late. He turned to her, furious. Explain. She brought up a holographic overlay of their command ship's bioscanners. The results were clear. At least 4 returning soldiers were already infected. They had been bitten in the chaos but had not yet turned. They're aboard our ships, she whispered. Zelvar's blood ran cold. Aboard the docking bay of Vorek's Wrath, the retrieval shuttles arrived in a frenzy. Vorthack warriors, wounded and shaken, rushed into the ship, their armor smeared with blackened human blood. Med techs rushed to contain them, scanning their bodies for external injuries. Among them, a soldier named Varlek collapsed to his knees, gripping his side where a deep gash had torn through his armor. He gasped for breath, his bioluminescent veins flickering erratically. A medic crouched beside him. What happened? Varlek shook his head. One of the humans, it bit me. I feel strange. Before the medic could respond, Varlek convulsed. His body arched violently, his veins darkening as his breathing turned ragged. His fingers clenched into claws, his mandibles chattering uncontrollably. Then, his body stilled. The medic stepped back, unease creeping into his expression. Varlek? In an instant, Varlek lunged, his fangs sinking deep into the medic's throat. The alien doctor let out a garbled shriek as blackened Vorthack blood sprayed across the bay. And then, chaos. One by one, the injured Vorthack who had been bitten turned. Their bodies jerked unnaturally before their glowing eyes clouded over. Their movements became erratic, unnatural. Then, as one, they attacked. The containment protocols failed almost immediately. The infected tore into their comrades with terrifying strength, overwhelming the uninfected before they could react. Screams echoed through the command ship as the infection spread like wildfire. Zelvar's command deck went into full lockdown as the security monitors displayed pure carnage. We have to contain this, Corvel urged, her mandibles clicking with tension. Seal the lower levels. Do not let this reach the reactor bay. Zelvar snarled. Arm all warriors. Kill anything that turns. Corvel hesitated. Including our own? His eyes darkened. They are no longer Vorthack. The command ship's alarm blared as the infection spread, consuming deck after deck. Vorthack warriors fought desperately against their own fallen brethren, but for every infected they cut down, another rose in its place. In the chaos, something far more terrifying happened. A transmission flickered onto their screens. A deep, guttural growl. At first, it sounded like static, random, senseless noise. But then, a voice emerged. It was not human. It was not Vorthack. It was something else entirely. Vorthack, stay. Zelvar's blood ran cold. Corvel's voice was barely a whisper. Commander, they're learning. The command deck of Vorax Wrath was bathed in red emergency lighting. The infection had spread faster than anyone could have anticipated. Entire sections of the ship had gone dark, sealed off in a desperate attempt to contain the reanimated horrors now roaming the corridors. Commander Zelvar stood rigid, staring at the flickering monitors. He watched in disgust as the infected tore through his warriors, their once proud Vorthak bodies reduced to mindless, snarling monsters. And then, there was the voice. "Vorthak, stay." The guttural, warped speech echoed in his neural interface. It was impossible. This disease was not just reanimating the dead, it was communicating. First Strategist Corvel's claws hovered over the console, her bioluminescent veins dim with unease. This should not be possible. The infected, they should not think. Zelvar clenched his mandibles. Yet they do. He turned to his officers. "We cannot fight what we do not understand. We need intel." Corvel hesitated. "You're suggesting we study these things? If we do not, we will end up like them," Zelvar growled. "Deploy another recon squad. I want to know what we are dealing with." Corvel nodded, but her expression remained grim. Planet surface, human ruins. A new squad of Vorthak commandos descended onto the abandoned city, moving through the ruined streets like wraiths. Plasma rifles hummed at the ready, scanning for movement. Unlike their predecessors, these warriors had orders to observe first, engage second. They didn't have to wait long. A shuffling sound echoed from a nearby alley. The squad leader, Zorvak, signaled his warriors to take defensive positions. The group advanced cautiously, only to find something unexpected. Not zombies. Humans. Survivors. Filthy, malnourished, and armed with primitive ballistic weapons, the humans reacted with instinctual hostility. Gunfire erupted as the ragged survivors opened fire on the Vorthak squad, their bullets ricocheting harmlessly off the aliens' energy shields. Zorvak snarled. "Foolish creatures." He raised his plasma rifle. "Wait!" The sudden shout startled both sides. The voice belonged to a human, a woman who stepped forward, holding up her hands. Zorvak analyzed her. Unlike the others, she carried herself with confidence. Her face was smeared with dirt, her clothes torn, but her blue eyes were sharp, intelligent. "Don't shoot," she said. "We don't have to be enemies." Zorvak hesitated, his finger hovering over the trigger. "You attacked us." The woman exhaled. "Because we thought you were something else." She gestured toward the ruined city. "You don't understand what's happening here. This isn't a war. It's a plague. A war implies you can win." Zorvak's mandibles twitched. "We are the Vorthak. We do not lose." The woman sighed. "Then you're already dead." A low growl echoed from the alley behind them. The tension shifted immediately. The survivors tensed, aiming their weapons toward the sound. Zorvak turned just in time to see movement in the shadows. The dead had arrived. The battle for knowledge. The first zombie lunged from the darkness, its rotting human frame moving with inhuman speed. Zorvak fired, a plasma bolt ripping through its torso, but it barely slowed. The thing snarled, not in pain, but in hunger. Then the others emerged. Dozens of them. The alley exploded in chaos. Survivors and Vorthak fought back-to-back, gunfire and plasma fire illuminating the darkness. But for every zombie cut down, another took its place. Zorvak noticed something horrifying. Some of the infected weren't human. Among the Horde, former Vorthak warriors shambled forward, their glowing eyes now clouded with death. Their exoskeletal armor was cracked and ruined, their movements jerky, unnatural. One of them still carried a plasma rifle, gripping it awkwardly like a memory of its former life. Then it did something impossible. It fired. The shot was wild, uncontrolled, but it was a clear sign. The infected were learning. Zorvak's stomach twisted in horror. "Fall back. Now." The group retreated, gunning down the closest zombies as they scrambled through the ruined streets. The woman from earlier yanked Zorvac by the arm, pulling him toward an abandoned subway tunnel. "This way. We have a shelter underground." For the first time, Zorvac hesitated, but with the Horde closing in, he had no choice. He followed. The survivors and the remaining Vorthack fighters dove into the tunnel, sealing the entrance behind them. For now, they were safe. A truce in the dark. The underground shelter was crude but functional, an old subway station reinforced with makeshift barricades. The humans had clearly lived here for some time. The woman turned to Zorvac, her expression unreadable. "You don't know what you've landed in the middle of, do you?" Zorvac's mandibles tightened. "We came to conquer." The woman smirked bitterly. "Bad timing." Corvel's voice crackled over Zorvac's comm status. Zorvac exhaled. "We have a problem." He glanced at the humans. The woman nodded. "More than one." She extended her hand. "I'm Captain Elena Vasquez. And if you want to survive this, you're going to need us." Zorvac stared at her outstretched hand. The Vorthack never sought alliances. They never needed to. But this? This was something else entirely. He clasped her hand. "Then speak, human." The underground shelter hummed with tense energy as the humans and Vorthack warriors formed an uneasy alliance. The survivors, led by Captain Elena Vasquez, watched warily as the towering alien soldiers adjusted to their new environment. Commander Zelvar's voice crackled over Zorvac's comm. "You did what?" Zorvac kept his voice steady. "I brokered a temporary alliance. These humans have valuable knowledge of the infection." Zelvar's mandibles clicked in frustration. "They are primitives." Zorvac's gaze flickered toward the tunnel entrance, where the sounds of distant growls echoed in the dark. "Perhaps. But they have survived where our warriors have not." A heavy pause. Then, Zelvar exhaled. "Gather intelligence. We need to understand this disease before it consumes us." Zorvac turned to Elena. "We need a specimen." Elena's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's a death sentence for whoever goes topside." Zorvac stepped forward, mandibles tightening. "Then I will go." The hunt for the infected. Zorvac, Elena, and a small team of survivors crept through the ruined city, scanning for a single undead target. Unlike the chaotic street battle from before, this mission required precision. The undead were evolving. One of the survivors, a wiry man named Ross, froze. "There," he whispered. A lone infected lurched through the rubble. It had once been a man, but its flesh had withered, its body twisted into something unnatural. Its movements were jerky, but aware. Zorvac aimed his plasma rifle. "Capture it alive." The survivors exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. Using electrified cables and improvised restraints, they worked as a unit to subdue the creature. It thrashed violently, shrieking in rage, but eventually, they secured it. Zorvac tapped his comm. "We have the specimen. Return immediately." Uncovering the horror. Back in the underground shelter, the infected was restrained in a reinforced containment chamber. Vorthack scientists and human doctors worked together, analyzing its grotesque form. Corvel's voice was filled with grim realization. "Commander, this virus is not natural." Zelvar's image flickered over the holoscreen. "Explain." Corvel gestured to the creature. "It does not function as a normal infection. It is rewriting biology at an impossible rate. The undead are forming new neural pathways, adapting." Elena frowned. "You're saying this thing thinks?" Corvel hesitated. "Not yet. But given time." The infected let out a deep, guttural chuckle. The room went still. Zorvac stepped forward. "Did it just?" The thing laughed. A distorted, mocking sound that sent chills through both human and alien alike. Then it spoke. "You cannot stop us." The monitors exploded with signals. The creature's neural activity spiked to impossible levels. The scientists barely had time to react before the undead snapped its restraints. Alarms blared as the thing lunged, shrieking with inhuman rage. The containment chamber erupted into chaos. The infected lunged at the nearest Vortex scientist, moving with unnatural speed. Zorvac reacted instantly. His plasma rifle hummed as he fired a direct shot to its chest. The creature staggered but did not fall. It turned toward him, its dead eyes gleaming with something new. Recognition. Corvel shouted, "It's learning. Kill it now." Elena drew her sidearm, unloading an entire magazine into the thing's skull. The bullets shredded flesh, but the creature kept moving. It reached for her. Then, with a final burst of energy, Zorvac fired point blank into its head. The creature collapsed, twitching one last time before finally growing still. The room fell silent. Elena wiped blood from her face, breathing heavily. That wasn't just some dumb corpse. Corvel nodded, her bioluminescent veins pulsing with tension. No. It was something far worse. A greater intelligence. Back aboard Vorex Wrath, Zelvar reviewed the data. The analysis was clear. The undead were not mindless. They were coordinated. A disturbing pattern emerged, the infection was evolving at an impossible rate, and every reanimated corpse was somehow connected. "This is not a virus," Corvel murmured. "It is a hive mind." Zelvar's mandibles twitched. "Are you suggesting these creatures are communicating?" Corvel turned to the monitors, where distorted frequency patterns pulsed like a heartbeat. "They already are." A sickening realization settled over the room. The undead were not just spreading, they were strategizing. The first attack. As if to confirm their worst fears, a sudden explosion rocked the underground shelter. Boom! The walls cracked as rubble collapsed. A monstrous roar echoed through the tunnels. Ross, one of the human survivors, shouted in terror. "They found us." Elena's blood went cold. "That's impossible. This place is hidden." Then she understood. "They're listening to us." Zorvac drew his blade. "Prepare to fight." The walls exploded as dozens of undead surged in. But these were not the mindless shamblers from before. They moved in formation. They climbed over one another, using the fallen to gain ground. Their glowing eyes pulsed in unison, driven by a single will. One of them, a reanimated Vortex soldier, raised a plasma rifle. It aimed with precision. And fired. Energy blasts ripped through the defenders. Zorvac and Elena fought side by side, cutting down the horde as fast as they could. But for every infected that fell, more swarmed forward. "They're adapting too fast." Corvel shouted. Elena gritted her teeth. "Then we need to adapt faster." She pulled Zorvac toward a maintenance tunnel. "We have to regroup." As they fled, Zorvac looked back. The infected Vortex soldier stared at him, its lips twisting into an eerie approximation of a smile. Then, in a voice distorted with death, it spoke. "Run, Vortex." A chill ran down Zorvac's spine. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about who would control the battlefield. Smoke and dust filled the air as Zorvac and Elena sprinted through the collapsing tunnels. Behind them, the undead surged forward, their grotesque forms moving with terrifying coordination. Plasma fire and gunshots rang out, but for every infected that fell, more took its place. They shouldn't be this organized. Elena shouted as she reloaded her rifle. They shouldn't be thinking, Zorvac growled. His claws gripped his energy blade tightly. A roar echoed through the tunnels. Something big was coming. Ahead, Corvel's voice crackled over the comms. Zorvac. We are detecting heavy seismic activity near your location. What is happening? Zorvac dodged a swipe from an infected Vortex and severed its head in one fluid motion. We're being overwhelmed. The hive mind. Another explosion rocked the underground shelter. Then it emerged. A massive undead creature, a fusion of multiple infected bodies, crawled through the wreckage. It had several heads, twisted limbs, and pulsing black veins coursing through its grotesque form. It wasn't just a zombie. It was an abomination. Elena's face drained of color. "You've got to be kidding me." The creature let out a guttural screech, its multiple mouths moving in eerie synchronization. Then, in a distorted, bone-chilling voice, it spoke. "You cannot escape." Zorvak's mandibles tensed. This was no longer just a battle against mindless corpses. The hive mind was evolving faster than they were. Desperate measures. Corvel's voice came through urgently. "Commander, if you can reach an extraction point, we can get you out." Elena shook her head. "If we leave, the rest of my people die." Zorvak's mandibles twitched in frustration. Every instinct told him to pull his forces out. But for the first time in his life, he hesitated. Zelvar's voice came through the comms. "Zorvak. Prioritize your survival. These humans are irrelevant." Zorvak's claws clenched. He looked at Elena, at her people, struggling to hold the barricades. For centuries, the Vortak had believed in conquest. In their superiority. But against this enemy, survival meant adaptation. And adaptation meant change. Zorvak activated his comm negative, "Commander." A stunned silence. "I will not abandon them." Zelvar's voice was icy. "You would defy your own kind for these creatures?" Zorvak raised his blade, stepping between Elena and the approaching horde. "We either fight together, or we all die." Elena smirked, despite the chaos. "Took you long enough. A plan of last resort." The abomination roared again, its multiple mouths splitting open. Dark tendrils lashed out, grabbing an unfortunate survivor and ripping him apart. Corvel's voice cut through the chaos. "Zorvak, we may have a solution. Speak quickly." Corvel's hologram flickered onto his wrist display. "Our ships have located the source of the infection's neural signals. There is a single, central node acting as the hive mind's core." Elena narrowed her eyes. "So, what? A brain?" "More like a centralized intelligence," Corvel corrected. "If we destroy it, we could disrupt the entire network of infected." Zorvak nodded. "Where is it?" Corvel's mandibles twitched. "Directly beneath you." Elena's stomach dropped. "Wait, are you saying this hive thing is underground?" Corvel's expression darkened. The infection did not spread across this planet. It came from within it. A sickening realization washed over them. This wasn't just an undead outbreak. It was an ancient force. And it had been waiting. One chance at victory. Zorvak turned to Elena. "If we destroy the core, the hive mind could collapse." Elena exhaled sharply. "Or it could make things worse. We have no other option." Another explosion rocked the tunnels as the abomination lumbered closer. Elena gritted her teeth. "Then let's blow this thing to hell." Zorvak activated his comm Corvel. "Prepare an orbital strike on my signal." "We're going down." Elena's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Before she could argue, Zorvak grabbed her and leaped into the darkness below. The two warriors plummeted into the abyss. Into the heart of the hive. Zorvak and Elena plummeted into darkness. Wind howled around them as they fell through the massive underground cavern, its walls pulsing with sickly bioluminescent veins. The air was thick with the stench of decay. Then, impact. Zorvak landed first, rolling to absorb the force. Elena hit the ground hard but managed to tuck into a rough landing. Both warriors groaned, weapons immediately drawn as they scanned their surroundings. They had reached the heart of the infection. The chamber stretched endlessly, a grotesque biome of living flesh and rock. In its center, a massive pulsating mass sat like a throne of nightmares. It was neither fully organic nor fully dead, a shifting mass of tendrils, bones, and rotting corpses fused into one horrific entity. And then, it spoke. Vortak, human, why do you fight? The voice slithered into their minds, layered and ancient, neither fully alive nor fully dead. It was not speech, it was transmission. Elena gritted her teeth, shaking off the invasive presence. Oh, hell no. We're not doing the creepy telepathy thing. Zorvak's mandibles twitched in disgust. It's aware. The entity pulsed, shifting like a grotesque heartbeat. You misunderstand. We do not seek war. We seek unity. Elena spat on the ground. Unity? You're turning everything into this. She gestured around the horrifying cavern. We are evolution. Zorvak's claws tightened around his blade. You are an abomination. The hive mind laughed. A sound that resonated through their skulls. You think you have a choice? Then the walls began to move. Hundreds, no, thousands, of undead figures emerged from the pulsating biomass. Some were human. Some were Vortak. Others were grotesque hybrids of both. They did not attack. They simply watched. Elena's breath hitched. This is wrong. The hive mind continued. We are inevitable. Your war is meaningless. Your resistance is temporary. Zorvak raised his rifle. Then let us be temporary together. He fired the first shot. The cavern erupted into chaos. The last stand. Zorvak and Elena fought back to back as the horde descended. Plasma fire and gunshots tore through the undead, but they just kept coming. Above them, Corvel's voice crackled through the comms. Zorvak! We have the orbital strike ready, but you must get clear. Elena slashed through a reanimated Vortak soldier. Not happening. We're knee-deep in this nightmare. Zorvak knew it was true. They were surrounded. The only way out was through. Elena, he called, cutting down another abomination. We must reach the core. She fired into the horde. And do what? Yell at it until it dies? Zorvak activated a plasma charge on his wrist. We destroy it. Elena's eyes widened. You're talking about a suicide run. Zorvak slashed through a lunging corpse. We are warriors. We die fighting. Elena hesitated for only a second. Then she grinned. Damn right we do. They pushed forward, forcing their way toward the pulsating mass at the chamber's center. The hive mind screamed. The sound was not just noise, it was pressure, forcing its way into their skulls, drowning them in an ocean of madness. Zorvak stumbled. His vision blurred. He saw his own warriors, twisted and corrupted, reaching for him. You will join us. He roared in defiance, driving his blade into the ground to anchor himself. Elena screamed in pain, gripping her head. Not today, you ugly freak. She raised her rifle, blasting the core with everything she had. The hive mind howled in rage. The cavern shook. The sacrifice. Zorvak slammed his wrist device onto the biomass. His plasma detonator blinked, charging. Corvel's voice came through, urgent. Commander, you must get clear. Zorvak cut her off. There is no time. Elena stared at him. No. Hell no. We are not doing this heroic sacrifice crap. The hive mind's tendrils lashed out, barely missing them. Zorvak shoved her back. You must live. Elena's face twisted in anger. Like hell I will. You think I came all this way just to run? The plasma charge neared full power. The hive mind screeched, realizing too late what was happening. Zorvak grabbed Elena and hurled her toward the exit. She screamed in rage. Damn you, Zorvak. Then. Boom. The explosion ripped through the cavern. The core detonated. The hive mind screamed in agony. Its entire network collapsed in a cascading failure, severing its control over the infected. Above ground, the undead fell silent. And then, one by one, they collapsed, their bodies finally succumbing to true death. The war was over. Aftermath. Elena clawed her way out of the ruined tunnels, coughing against the dust. The sky above was filled with the glow of Vortak warships. Corvel's voice came through the comms. The infection is gone. The network has collapsed. Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion washing over her. Yeah. It's over. She looked back at the ruins of the hive. Zorvak was gone. She clenched her fists. Damn stubborn bastard. A Vortak dropship landed nearby. Corvel stepped out, her bioluminescent veins pulsing solemnly. She looked at Elena with something close to respect. He chose well, Corvel said quietly. Elena swallowed hard, but she nodded. She turned to the remaining survivors, to the ruins of her world, and to the Vortak soldiers who had once been her enemy. Now, they were something else. Not allies. Not enemies. But survivors. Elena exhaled. All right, she muttered. Let's rebuild. Above them, the Vortak fleet hovered in silence. For the first time in their history, they had not conquered. They had endured. The war was beyond humanity. And against the undead, only the living had won.